There's a sequence of language acquisition that almost nobody teaches, and if you get it wrong, it doesn't matter how hard you work, you'll keep hitting the same wall. After this video, you're going to know exactly where to start, what to do next, and why every step has to happen in the order that it does. That clarity alone will change how you approach this. When you strip it all the way back, there are really only 4 ways you can interact with the language. 2 in the written form, reading and writing, and 2 orally, listening and speaking. Most language programs treat these 4 things as more or less equal. They'll have you doing a little bit of everything from day one. Some vocabulary, a little grammar, maybe some speaking practice, and on the surface that feels balanced, comprehensive even. But here's the problem with that approach. Not all 4 disciplines are equal, and more importantly, they're not meant to happen at the same time. There's a natural order, and when you follow it, everything builds on itself the way it's supposed to. The first thing to understand is that these 4 disciplines split into 2 groups. Listening and reading are input disciplines. You're taking the language in. Writing and speaking are output disciplines. You're producing it yourself. And the single most important principle of the acquisition method is this. Input comes before output. Now, almost every traditional language program does the opposite. They push speaking from week 1, sometimes even day 1. And I get why. Speaking feels like the goal, so it feels like you should start there. But think about it this way. Imagine you have to write a book report, but you haven't read the book. You sit down, you try to write something, and you have almost nothing to draw from. You might get a sentence or 2 out before you run out of material entirely. That's what it feels like when you try to speak a language you haven't absorbed yet. It's not a lack of effort, it's a lack of ammunition. You can't put out something that you don't already have inside of you. Listening and reading are how you read that metaphorical book. They're how you build up everything that speaking and writing will eventually draw from. There's a second reason the method always starts with input, and it's just as important. So speaking a foreign language, especially early on, is stressful. You have someone in front of you waiting for a response, you're running through possible translations in your head, you're second guessing every word, and not only is that uncomfortable, it's actually working against you because your brain doesn't retain information well under stress. So you're putting in the hard work, but you're only getting a fraction of the results. And after enough of that, most people quit. Starting with input sidesteps all of that because listening is low pressure. Reading is low pressure. There's no one waiting on you, no performance anxiety. You're just absorbing and your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. So here's the roadmap. 5 stops on the path to fluency. Stop 1, listening. This is where it all starts. Before your brain can produce the language, it needs to recognize it. And that recognition only comes from repeated exposure to real natural speech. Not scripted textbook audios, not slow robotic recordings, real people talking the way they actually talk. When I committed to this approach with Italian, the early weeks felt passive, but I felt like I could be onto something. I was just listening to as much YouTube as I could understand. And for a while, I understood very little. But now I know that things were happening underneath the surface. My ear was starting to map the language. Certain sounds were starting to feel familiar, and that familiarity is the foundation everything else gets built on. But the listening phase can also be useless if you aren't identifying and choosing the right kind of content to practice with, because not all input is created equal. And knowing the difference is one of the biggest factors in how fast you progress. I'm actually pulling together a deeper dive into that in some future videos. Stop 2, reading. Reading gets introduced alongside listening, not instead of. And the reason it comes here rather than at the start is that by the time you begin reading, your brain already has something to attach the written words to. You've been hearing the language. You've been building sound to meaning connections. Reading reinforces what your ear already knows rather than introducing the language from scratch. You also don't want to start with solely reading because although it gives you a feel for the structure and vocabulary of the language, you probably won't have any idea how the words are pronounced, which could lead to a really strong accent that'll make you hard to understand. Specific techniques come in at the reading phase. Ways to get the absolute most out of the time that you're putting in. How to use context to progress more efficiently. How to handle words you don't know. How to make sure the input you're reading is actually helping you advance rather than just keeping you busy. Stop 3, writing. Writing is the big shift in the process. The moment where you move from taking the language in to producing it yourself. And the reason writing comes before speaking is simple. There's no time pressure. When you write, you have time to think, to pull from what you've absorbed, to construct something in the language without the anxiety of a real-time conversation stressing you out. I like to think of writing as the on-ramp to speaking. Rather than jumping straight from input to live conversation, writing gets the output part of your brain moving first, in a low-stakes environment where you can build confidence. For me, I really relied on journaling with Spanish. A few sentences about my day, nothing crazy or even impressive, but the act of finally producing the language and putting it on the page did something important for me. It trained the output side of my brain before I needed it under pressure. Stop 4, speaking. By the time you get here, if you've done the work in the right order, you'll probably have a pleasant surprise. You already know way more than you think you do. The patterns are there, the vocabulary is there, the rhythm of the language is there. What speaking does is unlock what's already been built. There's a range of ways to approach this depending on your preferences. Some people want to ease in gradually, others want to jump straight into the deep end. And there are strategies for both, and each can get you where you want to go. Fluency. The first real conversation I had in Italian, not a practice exercise, an actual conversation, I was surprised by how much came out without me having to consciously think about it. It definitely wasn't perfect, but fluid in a way that I hadn't expected. And step 5, fluency. Speaking isn't actually the destination. Fluency is what's on the other side. The point where the language stops being something that you do and starts being something that you just use, automatically, without thinking. That's what the whole map is pointing towards. Now, one thing I want to be clear about, this isn't just a checklist where you need to fully complete one stage before touching the next. This process is supposed to be natural, so some of these phases are going to overlap. You might start light reading while you're still primarily in the listening stage. Writing might begin before you fully feel like reading is locked in. That's fine. What matters is the emphasis. Early on, the vast majority of your time should be consuming input, specifically listening. As you progress, reading takes on more weight, writing starts to come in, and speaking naturally follows. Over the next few videos, I'd like to go deeper on each of these stages, what they actually look like in practice, how to do them well, and how to know when you're ready to move forward. But if you take one thing from today, let it be this. You don't have to figure this out as you go. There's a clear path from where you are now to fluency, and every step on that path has a reason for being where it is. Follow the map and you'll inevitably get there. If this makes sense to you, subscribe and stick around, step by step, at your own pace, no textbooks, no stress.